President Hoover raised the highest personal income tax rate from 24% to 63% on January 1st of 1932. And he saw revenues go down. He also raised, then came President Roosevelt, who also raised the personal income tax rate to 79% from what was 63%. And people ask, why did we stay in that depression state for so long? It's very simple. We went into a double depression. Unemployment rates in that time, based upon those economic principles that they instituted, rose up to 20% plus in 1938. And over the course of the Great Depression, the government raised the top marginal personal income tax from what had been a low point of 24% to 83%. And that's where we are now. Because the bottom line is this: higher tax rates will bring these things: less employment, it'll bring less output, less sales, less profit, less capital gains, and all will lead to lower payrolls and lower tax receipts. But what it does end up bringing about is higher government spending. Now, what a lot of people don't kind of pay attention to is what is about to happen come January the 1st of 2011. This country will undergo the largest tax increases even since the time of Hoover and President Roosevelt. Because you're going to see taxes being raised on married couples, and they would pay more if they were single. You will see the tax rate on dividends will go from 15 to 39.6%. The tax credit for people with children will be cut in half from $1,000 to $500. Income tax rate on wage earners, that highest bracket, will go from 35% to 39.6%. And every tax bracket will probably see 4 to 5% because they will not be able to get enough revenue from just that highest tax bracket. And I hate to tell you, I think that the quote-unquote rich are not the only people who are married. The rich are not the only people who have children. The rich are not the only people who have investment accounts with dividends. Or when you look at, see, the capital gains will go from 15 to 20%. You know, it was very interesting when George Steinbrenner died. One of the side stories was that because of the fact that he died in this year, he saved his heirs some $500 billion. But there's talk already that they're going to make that retroactive. The death tax comes back, and it goes from 0% to 55% on people who have estates that are worth $1 million or more. They will increase the number of families paying the alternative minimum tax from 4 million to 28 million. This is the point where we're at in the United States of America. The public sector is outpacing the private sector in growth by 12 to 13%. Just last week, government spending is up 8%. If we're not careful, our debt is going to overtake our GDP. And see, that's the situation we find ourselves, because on one side, you have this growing public sector. And then the other side, you have a private sector that's being strangled. And as Noah talked about, his father, his small businesses. This is the choice that comes down for the United States of America right now, for this constitutional republic. On the public sector, you have three choices. You raise taxes, you print money, or you borrow money. That's basically their fiscal policies. On the private sector is where you grow an economy. And that is through investment, that is through ingenuity, that is through innovation. But if we continue on the road right now where there is so much uncertainty, where there's so much unpredictability for small business owners, and to include the each and everyday average American, not knowing, should I invest? Not knowing what's going to happen with my home. We are in a situation where economically we are creating more and more victims, more people being dependent upon government, which means that if there are more people dependent upon government, then government has to grow, which means they have to print more money, borrow more money, or raise taxes. It's what we call in the military the self-licking ice cream cone. But what we have to realize Going back to that percentage, 47% not paying federal income taxes. But they also vote. So they have the opportunity where people come in and they leverage that power by saying you can have a free health care, you can have free education, you can have a free car, you can have free appliances, you can have free cell phones. And that 53% are going to be the ones that are going to take care of it. And see, if we're not careful in the United States of America, we're not too far away from ending up like Greece, where you have people that are retiring at the age of 55 and getting 80% pensions from government. And government came down in Greece and said, we can't do it anymore. But when you make people so dependent, when you turn people into economic slaves, which is what's happening in the United States of America, they don't care. The progressive tax system that we have in this country has now lent itself to being a tool for class warfare. You can call it the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. You can call it the plebeian against the patricians. But it's happening right now. And that's the Marxist nature of what's going on. And the fact that we have so much nationalization of our production in our finance industry. You know, a couple of weeks ago, the finance reform bill passed. I went back and did some reading. How many people remember a thing called the Glass-Steagall Act? See, the Glass-Steagall Act came forth in 1933, and it really did set what were the duties and responsibilities. How do we delineate between, you know, commercial and then investment banking? But in 1991, we got rid of it. And see, something else happened that in combination with the Glass-Steagall Act being repealed. I mean, folks remember the Community Reinvestment Act in the late 70s. See, so all of a sudden, we lower standards. We say that it's a right for individuals to own a home. The government starts to interject themselves. And the government now says to people who really do not have the wherewithal to get some of the homes that they got, you will give homes to these individuals, or else you will be penalized. And there were some predatory lending practices as well on top of that, which was a good reason why we maybe should have kept that Glass-Steagall. Because all of a sudden people started getting involved with these mortgage-backed securities and bundling them together with the good securities and selling them off to other banks. And the next thing you know, they get sold off to overseas. And that led to the collapse that we saw. See, we don't need a 2,300-page bill coming from two individuals who were really the cause of what happened. We have a Senate Banking Committee. We have a House Finance Committee. We have individuals that you have elected, such as my opponent Ron Klein, who sits under Barney Frank on the House Finance Committee, that are supposed to be there doing what is right, to policing up, to making sure that they enforce these rules and regulations that are on the books. It is not that we need more rules and regulations. We need individuals in Washington, D.C. that are going to be representatives of the people and understand sound economic policies and principles and be responsive to you and not to the special interests that we have in Washington, D.C. That's the number one thing that we have to change. We can put all the laws that we want on the books. But if you have an individual like Charlie Rangel as the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, you see what you get. If you have an individual like Chris Dodd, who's head of the Senate Banking Committee, this is what you get. And you have an individual like Barney Frank, in charge of the House Finance Committee, who said nothing is wrong with Fannie and Freddie. And if you go back and you look at this financial reform bill, there's one entity, there's one agency out there that is not touched whatsoever. That's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
That's right.
And ladies and gentlemen, that entity is controlling 60 to 65% of the mortgages in the United States of America. It's a very dangerous premise that we're at. So, now what's the so what? Okay, I laid out all the things that we see as problems. I kind of gave you the roadmap of where we are today. This is what I believe in. I believe, first of all, the critical thing we have to do, we cannot have these tax increases coming. Because if the American people wake up and all of a sudden you find that your marginal tax rate is at 65 to 70%, if 2/3 to 3/4 of your earnings are going right out the door, we're going to break this country. We're going to stagnate this economy, as we have seen historically, and we're not going to move forward. And I don't care how much you raise taxes. This administration is not going to use those quote-unquote tax revenues to pay down a debt. all they're going to do is for more programs.